Welcome to the Bible Made Clear. So today I just want to talk for a few minutes, not a long video, and I would like to talk about topics for conversation when you have witnessing opportunities or possibly to create some witnessing opportunities. Now, I'm going to use as a platform for that, or kind of as the background, remember the paths, right? So paths was something that I had gone through earlier on the channel, and there's a playlist that you can go through that I provide evidence for each of the P, A, T, H, and S. But notice that predictive prophecy, the P, is really powerful. This is where the Bible really catapults itself beyond really any other writing that was ever or is now in existence. Predictive prophecy is a demonstration of one thing, and that is that the author is God. He's outside of time. So God, not being subject to time, can provide all the information, which is why the Bible's completed and already tells us the end, okay, because God has seen it. Now, in this PDF here, which is kind of page 1 and 2, which you can actually download. I'll leave a link in the notes below. But you can download this PDF, print it out, use it, cheat sheet or whatever. But it talks about predictive prophecy, prophecy regarding Israel's fulfilled, prophecy of Gentile nations fulfilled. In other words, examples from the Old and New Testament. And then about the Messiah, right? We're talking just in his first coming, okay? So notice it says, no other figure in human history had the anticipation of his arrival by predictive prophecy, the validation of his person and work by miracles, or the confirmation that he was the one predicted by prophetic fulfillment. So, in other words, there was an anticipation of him coming. He was predicted. Everybody expected him. The Jews did, when I say everybody. The Jews expected him. From the Garden of Eden, Genesis 3:15, there was a deliverer that was going to come to deal with the sin of man and redeem man from their sin. So, how would you know who that is? Well, there's multiple prophecies that are given over the years, and then Jesus comes and validates who he is by the miraculous, okay? He is that prophet. Not only is he providing teaching that is in line with all the rest of Scripture, okay? So he's providing teaching that is the truth itself. Actually, you have the truth teaching the truth, okay, if you will. And then so he's validated by the miracles, and then as he fulfills each of the predictions, it confirms that he's the one. Now, again, you don't get this with any other religion, no other person, nobody. So this is before we get to, supporting the Bible with archaeology or the documents or the historicity or even secular sources outside. So what I wanted to do is I wanted to give you some suggestions, actually, if you have a witnessing opportunity. And again, I'm just going to give you a few, but you can, as you learn the Bible, you can gather many more of these because there's a ton of them in there. So, for example, today one of the hot button issues is globalism. Well, globalism, you can bring it up. I mean, the news is filled with stuff related to it. This has been an issue for a number of years. And so no matter what the age group, as long as they understand what globalism is, you can have a discussion about it. Well, the opportunity, you could ask a typical question in a sense like, what do you think about the globalists who want to put everyone under their governmental control? Well, certainly, the support for that is a number of places in the Bible, right? So the Bible predicts that a global government will one day be in rule. Daniel chapter 2 with Nebuchadnezzar's dream, Daniel 7 with Daniel's vision, give predictive prophecy, while Revelation 13 describes the world leader, right? The beast or the Antichrist, the fulfillment, okay? So you not only have the predictive prophecy, but you have the fulfillment. Now, it says what he's going to do. It doesn't say exactly how he's going to do it. And that's where you can get into conversations about, well, if you're going to have a guy control the economy and you can't buy or sell unless you have his mark on your hand or forehead, well, how would you do that? Well, you'd have to certainly get rid of digital currency. I mean, you'd have to get rid of regular currency, which we're doing, okay? Everybody would have to be digitized. We're doing. And with the advent of Bitcoin and everything else, everything is becoming electronic. Well, once everything's electronic, everything's in a database, and once you have a database of everything, you can control it. We saw people control the spending of different groups during COVID. Banks would or would not allow people to spend money on certain things, which was really, at least in the United States, was a violation of their constitutional rights because it's their money. However, the point is that is a means of control. That is going to be how the Antichrist controls. Now, how is that going to be put together in that global economic system? That can happen in a number of ways, and you can kind of see the handwriting on the wall as things are put together. But my point is that this can get you into a discussion about the Bible, prophecy, and eventually get to the resurrection. The tribulation tells us that he's going to make this beast or Antichrist. He's better known as Antichrist, but technically he's called the beast. He'll make a 7-year treaty with Israel, Daniel 9:27. There's the prophecy. Break it 3.5 years in. Jesus and Paul mention it, right? Matthew 24:15. Jesus mentions the abomination of desolation. 2 Thessalonians 2:4. Paul tells how the Antichrist, or, the son of perdition, same person, is going to stand in the holy place, the rebuilt temple in Jerusalem, and claim that he's God. That's a whole nother subject. Talking about the rebuilt temple. The Jews are ready to build the temple. There is discussion about it today. There are some articles in different areas of the news regarding this, and it's actually become interesting because there are Muslims starting to be in support of that. They're focusing more on Mecca, less on the Temple Mount. There's an interesting shift that's going on, but be that as it may, the prophets predict that this is the worst time, the second 3.5 years of the 7, worst time in history that follow the beast's abomination that makes Jerusalem desolate. And there are the verses at the bottom that you can look up for yourself. You can only have one worse day. Now, I might have wrote that down wrong. It says Joel 2:3, and I put that in there, quite frankly, and then I was going to check it. Let me double check that for you. It may be Joel 2:2. Amos. Hold on. I'm almost there. All right. Yeah, it's Joel 2:2. So much for typos. Tried to get it perfect. Joel 2:2, right? But you can only have one worse day, one worse time, and that's going to be it. So that's an opportunity to talk to somebody about globalism, and again, wide topic, but you can get into the conversation about, isn't it amazing the Bible predicted this? It predicts globalism. Now, obviously, God has an ultimate global agenda where Jesus rules the world from Jerusalem in the millennial reign, but that's a little different subject. So, how about the topic of Israel? There's a hot button for you, right? A question could be, isn't it fascinating that Israel was dispersed for 2,000 years, could come back together in such turmoil? I mean, no other nation or group on the planet has lost their homeland, been dispersed to other nations throughout the world, and came back and became a nation again. That's never happened. They're unique in that. Why is that? Well, because of God, right? And again, it's predicted. The Bible predicts that Israel will be dispersed throughout the world. Deuteronomy 4:30 and 30 verses 1 through 9. And then God would bring them back to the land again from among the Gentile nations. Now, again, these are only a few verses, right? Isaiah 11:11 talks about when he's bringing them back the second time. Now, the first time they came back from Babylon, then they were dispersed in 70 AD. None of that had happened yet. But Isaiah's already talking about the second time. When he brings them from Egypt, God always mentions it. He said, I'm the one that brought you up out of Egypt. He tells them when he's going to bring them back from Babylon. He tells them in Jeremiah 25 and 29 that he's going to send them to Babylon for 70 years. Then he's going to bring them back to the land. But he's bringing them back from Babylon. But this bring them back from all the Gentile nations where they were spread, well, that's different. And so Ezekiel, he's the one that mentions in chapter 36 and 37 how they'd be brought back, start populating the land. All this stuff happened, and they became a nation in 1948. So what you're seeing is you're seeing them come back in unbelief. They're obviously not in belief at this point. And even Jesus references it at the end of the tribulation. He's going to gather together his elect from the four winds, right? So there's a gathering, there's an ultimate gathering together in the end. But either way, though the Matthew 24:31, and it's not the rapture, by the way, though it really is reference to the end of the tribulation. Ultimately, Israel will be gathered together to be in their land for the millennial reign. In fact, they will, by the end of the tribulation period, come to believe that Jesus of Nazareth is their Messiah. Again, Hosea 5:15 anticipates it, which you can connect with Matthew 23:39 and Luke 13:35, where Jesus says, you'll not see me until you say, blessed is he who comes in the name of the Father. Now, interesting side note, Romans 9, 10, and 11 are related really just really to Israel. Now, we apply some of the verses in Romans 9, 10, and 11 to, different aspects of theology or the gospel or whatever, which are valid. But in Romans 10, where it talks about calling upon the name of the Lord to be saved, the immediate context of that is Israel calling upon the name of the Lord for them to be saved. In other words, they are coming to faith, because Romans 9 talks about how they aren't there and they didn't receive what they should have because they didn't seek it by faith, the end of Romans 9 into 10. And then as 10 develops, Paul is saying, look, Israel's going to come to that place where they need to call upon the Lord for salvation. They need to recognize Jesus as their Savior, right? Romans 10:4, right? Christ is the end of the law to those that believe, right? So Romans, my point is talking about the calling upon the name of the Lord, the confessing with your mouth. Though we use that for the gospel, the immediate context is really related to Israel. They need to confess it. They need to call upon him, okay? That's how he's going to return, right? They come to that recognition. But anyways, so How about the Ukraine war? Well, I mean, obviously that's on everybody's mind. A typical question could be, did you know Russia will not only attack Ukraine, but will come with other nations to attack Israel? So the Bible predicts Russia will align with Iran, which used to be called Persia originally, Ethiopia, Libya, Turkey, and Western Europe to attack Israel. This is Ezekiel 38 and 39. It's referred to as the Ezekiel 38 war. Other nations such as Saudi Arabia, which is called Sheba and Dedan in the text, Spain, and possibly the U.S., if the U.S. is anywhere in prophecy, that's where it is, will only question the invasion but not interrupt it. That's in Ezekiel 38:13. So God will protect Israel and turn Russia back from the conflict in a massive defeat. You see that in the first verses of Ezekiel 39. But the point is that this is a war that is probably going to occur either at the beginning of the tribulation or into the tribulation after it starts. Many Bible scholars think that it will occur right around the beginning or just prior to. But again, it doesn't tell you the exact time that it's going to occur, just how it's going to occur. But this is stage setting. The Ukraine war is only stage setting for the Ezekiel 38 war. Russia is only beginning their pursuit of natural resources for the benefit of their economy. Russia needs natural resources. A few years ago, Putin talked to Netanyahu about gaining access to some of those in the Mediterranean, and Benjamin Netanyahu said, no, that's not on the table, and Putin was very angry. So they may come down and get it another way. Now, just for those of you who may not be old enough, there's a book that was written in the early 80s. It was called 1982 Averted. And it had to do with this Ezekiel 38 war. So basically, this Ezekiel 38, 1982 Averted, or whatever the book is called, I forget. I got it at home. Talked about how Russia had stored massive amounts of weapons in preparation to go in and attack Israel in these caves and underground, caves or whatever. But it took them a week on these huge flatbeds to get everything out of there. Okay, once they discovered it. It was a war that was basically averted. And the book goes through and kind of talks about that. So it's not like Russia has not had these intentions in the past, but this time they're going to align with certain nations. Now, it's interesting. If you look at the areas of these nations that are listed here, Iran, Ethiopia, Libya, Turkey, Western Europe, and all that, the connection really is with Muslim nations that are really connected by Islam. So, and there's a large Islamic contingent in Russia. So it's quite interesting, but either way, something to have a conversation about, at least to bring up Bible prophecy and get to the place of the resurrection. How about evil and wickedness increasing? We certainly see that. Now, a typical question would be, did you know the Bible taught that the closer we get to Jesus' return, that evil and wickedness will increase, but people will just ignore it? They'll live on as though it's not happening. Jesus said that things would be like the days of Noah just before his return, right? Matthew 24. The return would end in judgment. So this would spark really the beginning of the 7-year tribulation period mentioned by Paul in 1 Thessalonians chapter 5. Once it happens, again, if you go through chapter 5, this would be right after the rapture. And so Paul is dealing with an us and them situation. The tribulation period will come upon them and they will not escape. Well, they won't escape because the opportunity was the rapture, and they let that go. So again, pretty interesting. Evil is an easy conversation to have. Now, the days of Noah, why is it similar? Because God said that the imagination, desires, and purposes is what the word imagination really means, of man was continually evil in his heart, and that man had corrupted himself, that the earth was filled with violence. That's Genesis 6. So, have you seen the evening news lately? Well, things are not really getting more peaceful anywhere. Jesus talked at the beginning of Matthew 24 about wars and rumors of wars, and well, that's certainly, though that has ebbed and flowed throughout the years in relation to these other prophecies regarding the beginning of the tribulation period, these things are escalating. So what's the point of all this, right? So pick your topic and support it with predictive prophecy from the Bible. It will enable a discussion about the Bible and possibly provide an opportunity to share the gospel. The thing I love about Paths is that you can start with the Bible. You don't have to work your way there. A lot of apologetics forces us to try to get people thinking properly so that they can understand logically, and then we build a case for the Bible, and then once we get to the Bible, then we're starting. The thing I like about this, quite frankly, is that you're using the Bible to build your case. A person can't say, "Oh, the Bible, that's ancient nonsense." Like, well, then how did it get it right? How did it get all the predictions right, even in the Old Testament? And I give examples in the playlist videos of there's prophecies in the Old Testament that came fulfilled in the Old Testament. So how does God get all that right? I've given some examples, right, in brief, but these are only a few. There are many more verses that can be used to support the ones given, whether you use the examples I provided, those few, or whether you come up with more on your own, which there can be a lot, right? Pray before you know you will be encountering unbelievers. Now, you don't always know. I mean, you can be out running errands. You don't know you're going to end up in a conversation with anybody. But, if you know you're going to be seeing unbelievers, ask the Lord for wisdom and biblical recall. Say, Lord, help me to remember the things that I've read. We need to be faithful to put the time in to remember verses and subjects connected with them. God will provide the recall for us at the right time, but we have to put it in for him to recall it out. So you can put the time in for that. More encounters than not provide an opportunity to share the gospel if we are aware of the situation and alert to the available hints from our conversations with people. Look, people are generally talking about current issues, and current issues are connected with the Bible. Doesn't matter whether you're talking about some evil that somebody is doing or from a national level, from a political level, whatever it is. You can get there. And, globalism is an easy political level conversation. Nations, Israel, that's an easy, daily occurrences and bad things. Hey, that it's easy to get to evil and wickedness, and the Bible predicts its increase. So these are just kind of, no pun intended, but a quick path to basically get into a conversation about the Bible and then get to the gospel. Never avoid sharing because you think you won't have the answers. You can always get the answers and get back to those you've talked to. Sometimes people are afraid to get into a conversation because, and I've talked to so many Christians, they say, well, I was afraid I didn't know enough, so I didn't want to say anything and look stupid. You're not going to look stupid. Nobody knows everything about everything. Look, if I get asked a question about something that I don't know or I'm not familiar with, if it's a witnessing opportunity, I tell them, hey, I'll get back with you. Some years back when me and my wife were on vacation, ended up meeting a nice guy. He was a manager at the place that, we were staying at, and I forget how we get into the conversation, but it was around the time when everybody was having a meltdown because there was supposed to be a blood moon coming. Unfortunately, a lot of the more hyper of the Christian movements were talking about, this is it. It's, some people were saying it's part of the tribulation period, this and that. We weren't even in the tribulation. How could it be? But anyway, so I get into a conversation with this guy. I think we're at the swimming pool. And basically, it sounded like he was like a backslidden Christian. But he was all nervous that he wasn't ready and then the end was coming. And I said, look, this is not the end. I said, this is going to be a moon that looks, red. I said, but it's not connected with any kind of prophetic fulfillment, and I said, but, and then I talked to him about getting back with the Lord and everything else, and seemed to be a good conversation. But, I got his email, and I said, let me send you some information. So I did. Now, I don't know whatever happened to this guy, but hopefully at least it had some impact, in his life. But I wanted to at least straighten him out. He obviously had a great misunderstanding of what the Bible taught regarding this stuff. And Jesus said he'd be with us until the end of the age, right? So all authority is given to him. He's with us. So, you're in good hands. So it doesn't matter if you have all the answers. You can always find them. The answers are there. And you not knowing them does not mean that they don't exist. It only means you don't know them. And you can always get back. Listen, I've gotten back with people many times because I didn't have an answer for them. I said, well, you know what? Let me get back to you on that. And I had to go look stuff up, or, and I've told them at times, I'm not exactly sure, but let me, I don't want to answer you until I am. Let me double check that, and then I will get back with you. And, you can always get somebody's email or whatever and send them information. So this is a good opportunity, especially we're going into summer. People are going to be on vacation. You're going to run into people you don't know. It's a time where in connecting with other people, you can get into conversations, but, you want to get right to the heart of the issue while you're talking about it, because people can't endure a class when you're out just kind of socializing somewhere or sitting at a pool, and then you get into a conversation that may not last more than 5 or 10 minutes. So you want to kind of, get right to the point. But anyways, hopefully that was helpful. Like I say, I'll, in the notes below, I'll put the link so that you can get so you can download the PDF of the paths, just kind of the cheat sheet breakout, and that's about it. So until next time, may God richly bless you as you continue to study His Word.